He destroyed my soul on the very night I should have felt safe in my new family's arms. I was 26, newly married, and for the first time in my life, I thought I had found real happiness. My husband Daniel was kind, gentle, and hardworking. We had been together for almost 3 years before we got married, and during that time, I learned to believe in love again after a series of disappointments. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. We planned our wedding quickly, not because of pressure, but because we couldn't wait to start our life together. Daniel came from a very traditional family. His mother, quiet and warm, adored me from the first moment we met. His younger sister looked up to me, even calling me Big Sis long before the wedding. And then there was his father, a man respected in the community, admired for his successful business, always dressed sharply, always carrying an air of authority. He was in his late 50s, but fit, charismatic, and intimidating in ways I couldn't fully explain. Whenever he entered a room, silence followed him like a shadow. On our wedding day, I should have only been thinking about my husband and the vows we exchanged, but even then, something about my father-in-law unsettled me. His eyes lingered too long on me during the ceremony, as though he was memorizing more than just a daughter-in-law's face. When he hugged me after the vows, his hands pressed harder than they should have. His breath lingered at my neck for a moment too long. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was nerves, the adrenaline of the wedding, maybe just my imagination. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and endless toasts. Everyone seemed genuinely happy for us, and I clung to that warmth, desperate to ignore the unease creeping into my bones. But then came the moment that would forever change how I looked at my husband's father. It was late, the reception winding down, guests slowly leaving. I had gone upstairs to the bridal suite provided by the venue, a glass of champagne still buzzing in my veins. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, carefully removing my earrings, when the door opened. I expected Daniel. I wanted him. But instead, it was his father. The air in the room shifted instantly, heavy, suffocating. He closed the door behind him, locking it with a deliberate click. My heart pounded. I froze, unable to make sense of what I was seeing. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost mocking as he said, "You are part of my family now, and in this family, I get what I want." I will never forget the cold terror that flooded me in that moment. My mind screamed at me to move, to shout, to run, but my body betrayed me, paralyzed in fear. That night, everything shattered. My sense of safety, my trust in the family I had just joined, my innocence, all torn apart by the man who was supposed to protect me. When Daniel found me later, I was curled in the corner of the room, shaking, broken. He thought I was simply overwhelmed by the wedding, exhausted, maybe drunk. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth, not then. How could I? This was his father, the man he idolized most, the man who had raised him. How do you look into your new husband's eyes and tell him that the person he idolized destroyed you? So I stayed silent. That was my first mistake. In the days that followed, I tried to pretend nothing had happened. I smiled when I had to. I played the role of the happy new bride. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I saw my father-in-law, nausea twisted my stomach. His smirk, the way his eyes slid over me when no one else was looking, it made my skin crawl. And yet, in front of everyone else, he was the picture of dignity, The doting father, the proud patriarch, the perfect man. Daniel noticed my distance. He asked me if I was okay, if something was wrong. I told him I was just adjusting, just tired. Lies stacked on lies, and each one dug me deeper into a pit of despair. Nights became torture. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes of his voice in my head, reliving that night over and over. But then came the first sign that my silence wouldn't protect me forever. One afternoon, only a week after the wedding, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. My hands trembled as I opened it. The words made my blood run cold. "Don't forget what happened. You belong to me now." I dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat, my heart thundering against my ribs. I knew who it was. I didn't need a name. That was the moment I realized this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. I stared at that message for what felt like hours, the letters burning into my skin. You belong to me now. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall, to run to Daniel and confess everything. But instead, I did what I had done since that night. I swallowed my truth, buried my pain, and pretended nothing was wrong. But nothing felt normal anymore. Every sound made me jump. Every vibration of my phone sent a chill crawling up my spine. And every time my father-in-law's name appeared on the family group chat, I felt sick. He never wrote directly to me there, no. He played his role perfectly. The doting grandfather-to-be, the respected head of the family. But I couldn't unsee the truth behind his mask. It didn't stop with one message. They kept coming, short, sharp, like daggers. Don't look at me like I'm a stranger. Remember, silence keeps your marriage safe. You should be grateful I chose you. I deleted them as quickly as I could, terrified Daniel might see them. But the paranoia grew. I found myself clutching my phone everywhere, even sleeping with it under my pillow, afraid he would send something while I wasn't looking. And then, slowly, Daniel began to notice. He'd ask why I was so protective of my phone, why I always turned it screen side down. I'd laugh nervously and tell him I was just tired of work messages, or that I was avoiding annoying friends. Each lie carved another crack in my soul. But Daniel wasn't the only one who noticed. My father-in-law began testing boundaries in small, horrifying ways. When we visited their house for dinner, he'd accidentally brush against me in the kitchen, his hand lingering a moment too long. If I pulled away, his eyes would darken, as if silently warning me, "Don't you dare expose me." Sometimes he'd catch my gaze across the table and smirk, subtle enough that only I would see. My mother-in-law, sweet and oblivious, would pass him the salt, chatting happily about recipes, while I sat there choking down my food, feeling like I was suffocating. Daniel couldn't see it, or maybe he didn't want to. He was so proud of his father, so blind to the monster behind the mask. When I grew quiet at family gatherings, Daniel would squeeze my hand under the table and whisper, "I love you. Just hang in there, okay?" He thought I was nervous about fitting in, about being accepted. The truth was far darker than he could imagine. The distance between us widened. I stopped initiating affection, flinched when he touched me from behind, avoided his kisses when they lingered too long. He noticed, of course. Did I do something wrong? He'd ask softly at night. I wanted to tell him, to pour everything out, but every time I tried, the words died in my throat. The image of his father's smirk, the threat in those messages, the fear of destroying Daniel's world, it all silenced me. Then came the first slip, the first piece of undeniable evidence that something more sinister was happening.
One evening, Daniel left his phone on the couch while he went to shower. Out of habit, I reached to put it on the table and froze. A notification flashed across the screen, a message from an unknown number. My chest tightened. I shouldn't have looked. I knew it, but I did. It read, "Has she told you yet?" I felt the blood drain from my face. My fingers trembled as I stared at the words. Has she told you yet? Told him what? My secret? His father's crime? Or something even worse? I quickly placed the phone back, as if it had burned me, my mind spinning. Who sent it? Could it be him? Was he taunting me through Daniel's phone now? Or was there someone else who knew? When Daniel returned, I forced a smile, pretending nothing was wrong. But my heart was no longer racing. It was pounding itself to pieces. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I couldn't stop thinking about the message. I wanted to wake him up, to demand answers. But what if he turned against me? What if he didn't believe me? His father had everyone fooled. Who would stand with me? The next day, another piece of evidence appeared. While folding laundry, I noticed a small slip of paper tucked into the pocket of my coat. My hands shook as I unfolded it. 3 words, written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. Meet me. Tonight. No name. No explanation. Just those words. I stared at the paper until my vision blurred. My mind twisted itself in knots. Was this another sick game from him? Or was it someone trying to help me? Someone who knew the truth? I didn't tell Daniel. I couldn't. But I kept the note hidden, close to my chest, my heart hammering every time I touched it. That night, I sat by the window, staring out at the darkness, waiting for some kind of sign. But nothing came. No knock, no figure in the shadows, just silence. And in that silence, one thought echoed louder than all the others. I wasn't safe. Not in my marriage, not in my home, not in my own skin. But what I didn't realize then was that this was only the beginning. The real nightmare and the real plan for revenge was still waiting in the shadows. The note didn't leave my mind. I kept it tucked away in the bottom drawer of my dresser, hidden beneath layers of folded clothes. But its presence lingered like poison. Every time I opened the drawer, my eyes went straight to that slip of paper, as if it were breathing, pulsing, alive. Days passed. I told myself it was nothing, a cruel prank, a figment of paranoia. But deep down, I knew better. Someone wanted me to meet them. Someone knew something. The question that tore me apart was whether they were an enemy or an ally. Then came the first undeniable sign that I wasn't imagining things. It was a Tuesday night. Daniel had fallen asleep early on the couch, the TV murmuring softly in the background. I curled up beside him, trying to let the noise drown out my thoughts. When his phone buzzed, he didn't stir. My heart leapt as I glanced at the screen. Another unknown number. I hesitated only a second before reaching for it. The message was blunt, brutal. She'll never tell you. She's too afraid. I froze, every muscle locking. The words blurred, my pulse roaring in my ears. It wasn't me who was writing these. It wasn't me planting this. Someone else was feeding Daniel clues. But why? And then, as if the universe wanted to mock me, another buzz followed, this time from his father. I swallowed hard and opened it. It was a photo, grainy but unmistakable. It was me, in the kitchen, alone, cooking dinner. The angle was from outside the window. My hands went cold. My father-in-law wasn't just sending messages anymore. He was watching me, photographing me, stalking me in my own home. I wanted to scream, to wake Daniel, to shove the phone in his face and yell, "Do you see now? Do you finally see what he's doing?" But fear clamped my throat shut. What if Daniel defended him? What if his loyalty ran deeper than his love for me? So I did nothing. I deleted the photo, erased the messages, and slipped the phone back where it had been. Then I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like prey trapped in a cage. But the next day, the pressure grew unbearable. At lunch, I overheard Daniel on a call with his father. His tone was sharp, frustrated. "Dad, stop it. Just stop." I froze, my heart racing. Stop what? Did he know? Could he finally see through the mask? When he hung up, I asked cautiously, "Is everything okay?" He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "It's just Dad being Dad. Always overstepping, always meddling." I wanted to push, to ask what exactly his father had done, but the weight of the secret crushed me back into silence. My lips burned with unsaid words. That night, though, my resolve cracked. I couldn't take the torment anymore. As we lay in bed, I whispered, "Daniel, if I told you something terrible, would you believe me?" He turned to me, brows furrowed. "Of course, you know I'd believe you. What's going on?" The words hovered on my tongue. I could almost feel the relief of saying them. But then I saw his eyes, so trusting, so unguarded, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't shatter him. I shook my head, forcing a weak smile. "It's nothing, just stress." He frowned, unconvinced, but didn't press further. That was the night I realized silence was no longer enough. I needed proof, undeniable proof, something that would leave him no choice but to believe me. So I began watching, waiting.
Setting my own quiet traps. I checked Daniel's phone more often, not to betray him, but to see what messages came through. I started scanning receipts when he emptied his pockets, noticing dates and times. And then, one evening, I found it. A crumpled hotel receipt, paid in cash. The name wasn't Daniel's, it was his father's. The date was 2 nights prior. My stomach dropped as I read the room number, 314. Why would my father-in-law book a hotel room when his home was only 15 minutes away? Why pay in cash? And more importantly, who was with him? I stuffed the receipt into my pocket, trembling. Proof. Finally, proof. But proof of what exactly? His sickness? His obsession? Or something bigger, something darker? My paranoia spiraled. I imagined him meeting another victim, luring her into that room. I imagined him keeping evidence there, photos, videos, things that could destroy me if he ever revealed them. That night, I confronted him. Not directly, no, I wasn't that brave yet. But I let my eyes meet his when we sat at the dinner table, the receipt burning in my pocket. "I know," I whispered under my breath, low enough that only he could hear. For a fraction of a second, his fork paused. His lips twitched in a smirk before he continued eating as if nothing had happened. But I saw it, that flicker of recognition, that silent acknowledgement. He knew I was onto him. After dinner, as we all stood by the door, he leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. "Careful," he murmured. "You're not ready to play this game." My knees nearly buckled. I didn't tell Daniel that night. I couldn't. But I lay awake with the receipt clutched in my fist, my mind spiraling. Something inside me snapped then. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I wasn't going to sit in silence while this man stalked me, tormented me, and twisted my life into a nightmare. I decided I would follow him. I would go to that hotel room. I would find out what he was hiding. And when I did, there would be no going back. I told myself I wouldn't do it. I told myself that if I crossed that line, there would be no way back. But the receipt burned in my mind like a brand. Room 314 staring at me every time I closed my eyes. I couldn't rest until I knew. 2 nights later, I drove to the hotel. My hands shook on the steering wheel the entire way. The building rose against the night sky, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. The lobby was quiet, the receptionist barely looking up as I walked past, my pulse hammering in my ears. I took the elevator, each ding dragging me closer to the truth I both craved and feared.
The hallway on the third floor smelled faintly of cigarettes and bleach. Room 314 loomed before me, its door closed, silence pressing on all sides. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the wood. At first, nothing. Then, faint sounds, voices. One of them his, smooth, deliberate, chillingly calm. The other, muffled, strained. I couldn't make out the words, but I caught the tone. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't loving. It was commanding, forceful, wrong. My breath caught, tears pricking my eyes as I realized I wasn't his only victim. I backed away, my heart slamming, desperate to flee before someone opened the door. But fate had other plans. The door cracked open. I barely had time to duck behind a corner as my father-in-law stepped out, adjusting his collar. His expression was calm, too calm. A predator leaving the scene of the hunt. Behind him, I saw her, a woman, maybe younger than me, sitting on the edge of the bed. Her face was hidden in her hands, her shoulders trembling. He didn't look back. He just walked down the hallway, whistling softly, leaving the door ajar. I froze, torn between fear and fury. My body screamed at me to run, but my soul demanded I act. Slowly, I edged closer, peering into the room. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes met mine, wide, hollow, drenched in despair. She didn't speak, didn't move, but in that single look, I understood everything. She was broken. She was trapped, just as I was. I wanted to rush in, to hold her, to say, "You're not alone." But the weight of danger pressed me back. If he caught me there, I didn't know what he'd do. So I turned and fled, tears blurring my vision, my breath ragged as I burst into the night air. Driving home, I could barely hold the wheel. My mind swirled with questions, accusations, guilt. Was she one of many? Did Daniel know, even suspect? And if I told him now, would he still believe his father over me? The next morning, I confronted him, not with the full truth, but with the edges of it. "Daniel," I said, my voice shaking, "do you really know your father? I mean, really know him?" He frowned, startled. "What are you talking about? Has he ever crossed lines? With anyone? With you? With me?" His expression hardened. "Why would you even ask that? He's my father. Yeah, he can be controlling, but he's not." He cut himself off, shaking his head. "You're letting stress mess with you. You've been so paranoid lately." Paranoid? The word sliced into me. How could he not see? How blind could love make him? I didn't push further, not yet. But that night, the distance between us stretched wider than ever. I lay beside him in silence, his breathing steady, while I drowned in thoughts too heavy to share. Still, the memory of that girl's eyes haunted me. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be the only one carrying this burden. The following weekend, at a family gathering, I thought I saw a chance. My mother-in-law was in the kitchen, quietly arranging dishes. She always seemed subdued, almost invisible, as if decades of living under his shadow had hollowed her out. I pulled her aside, my voice trembling. "Has he ever hurt you?" Her hand stilled on the tray. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't even breathe. Then, slowly, she lifted her eyes to mine. There was something there, pain, fear, recognition. But she only whispered, "Don't." That single word shattered me. Don't. Don't speak it. Don't fight. Don't hope. And then he appeared in the doorway, smiling too wide. "Everything all right here?" I forced a smile back, my heart thudding. "Yes, everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. That night, I confronted him more directly. I found him alone on the porch, sipping whiskey, his gaze on the dark yard. My courage came in waves, shaky but desperate. "I know what you're doing," I whispered. He didn't turn. He didn't flinch. He just chuckled, low and bitter. "Do you?" My fists clenched. I saw her, in that hotel room. You're not as careful as you think. Finally, he looked at me.
His eyes gleamed with a mix of amusement and menace. And what exactly do you think you saw? Be careful with accusations, dear. Words can ruin lives. Yours, I spat, my voice breaking. He smiled, slow and poisonous. Or yours. My breath caught. The threat was clear, sharp as glass. If I pushed him, he'd destroy me. That was the night I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even about Daniel. It was about survival. His power wasn't just in what he did. It was in the fear he planted, the silence he cultivated. And I had a choice. Remain silent, let him keep winning, or burn everything to the ground. I always thought the worst kind of betrayal was silence, but I was wrong. The worst is being proven right. The worst is staring at the truth you prayed would never come, and realizing there's no one left to protect you from it. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. Daniel was working late, his phone dead, unreachable as usual. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I was in the kitchen when the message came, a number I didn't recognize. Just 3 words that froze me in place. Check the hotel. No name, no explanation, just those words. My hands trembled as I dialed the number back, but it rang once, then disconnected. Whoever it was didn't want to be known, or couldn't risk it. I almost ignored it, almost convinced myself it was a prank, but my gut wouldn't let me. So I grabbed my keys and drove, my heart pounding like war drums. The same hotel, the same 3rd floor. This time, I didn't hesitate. I marched down the hallway, my body trembling with rage and dread. And when I reached room 314, I didn't knock. I pushed the door open. And there he was. My father-in-law, shirt half undone, his body looming over another woman. But this time, it wasn't a stranger. It was someone I knew. Someone who cut the last string holding my world together. It was Daniel's sister, my sister-in-law. She froze when she saw me, her face pale, her eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. He, on the other hand, didn't flinch. He didn't stumble or apologize. He just straightened his shirt and smirked, like he had been waiting for this. "Well," he said, his voice smooth as poison, "I suppose the secret's out." My stomach churned, my knees buckled, my words came out in a whisper. "How long?" She started sobbing, but he cut her off with a sharp look. "Long enough," he said casually. "Long enough to know loyalty is an illusion." My breath caught. I wanted to scream, to run, to collapse. But instead, I pulled out my phone. My fingers shook as I hit record. "You think you can bury me?" I said, my voice rising. But this time, I'm the one holding the shovel. He chuckled, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing me. And who will believe you? My son? My family? Do you think anyone would side with a paranoid little girl over me? But I didn't back down.
"They don't need to believe me," I hissed, holding up the phone. "They'll see for themselves." For the first time, his smirk faltered. Just for a second. Enough to tell me I had struck the nerve. The next day, I set the trap. A family dinner. Everyone gathered at the table, laughter forced, tension humming in the air. I waited until the plates were full, until the glasses were raised, and then I pressed play. The recording filled the room. His voice, cold and mocking. His words about loyalty. The sound of her sobbing. The silence that followed was absolute, like the world itself had stopped breathing. Daniel's glass shattered on the floor. His mother's hands flew to her mouth. His sister buried her face in her arms, wailing. And he, the man who had haunted my nights, stolen my safety, simply sat there, his face hard as stone, his eyes daring anyone to challenge him. But the silence broke. Daniel's voice, low and shaking with fury. "Tell me it's not true." His father didn't answer, just leaned back in his chair, defiant. Daniel roared, slamming his fists on the table. "Tell me!" And still silence. That was the moment the last piece of Daniel's faith crumbled. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. His mother collapsed in sobs. His sister screamed, begging for forgiveness that could never come. And I stood there, trembling, victorious and broken all at once, because I had won the war of truth, but the battlefield was littered with the ruins of everyone I loved. That night, the house was chaos, yelling, crying, accusations tearing through every wall. Neighbors must have heard, because faces appeared at windows, whispers spread like fire. By midnight, everyone knew. His empire of fear and silence collapsed in a single night. And him, my father-in-law, he didn't beg, he didn't apologize. He just glared at me with eyes so full of hatred that I knew I had marked myself for life. "You think this is over?" he whispered, close enough for only me to hear. "This is just the beginning." But I didn't flinch. For the first time since that night when he stole my safety, I didn't cower. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "So am I." Because I knew then, revenge wasn't just an auction. It was survival. The storm didn't pass overnight. It never does. But once the truth is out, it spreads like wildfire. The morning after the dinner, the house felt like a war zone. Shattered glass on the floor, chairs overturned, Daniel's mother locked in her room, and Daniel himself gone. No note, no call, nothing. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made everything worse. But then the phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was hollow, like someone had scraped the life out of him. "I need space," he said. "I need to breathe." I wanted to tell him I understood, but the truth was, I was terrified. Because I knew the man we had exposed would not go down quietly. And I was right. By the end of the week, whispers had turned into shouts. His business partners pulled out. Clients canceled contracts. Old rumors resurfaced, now confirmed by the recording I had leaked. His empire, built on fear and silence, crumbled brick by brick. But with every fall, his rage grew. He came to the house one night, pounding on the door, screaming threats so vile they shook me to my core. The neighbors called the police. For the first time, he was taken away in handcuffs. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was the weight of years pressing on my chest. Because monsters don't just disappear when the door slams shut.
They linger in your bones, in your shadows, in the way you flinch at every noise in the night. Still, I didn't stop. I pressed charges. I brought forward the messages, the recordings, the testimony I had buried in fear for so long. His sister, broken and humiliated, came forward too. Together, we built a case strong enough to hold. And when the trial began, the courtroom buzzed like a hive. The man who once commanded respect walked in handcuffed, his head high, but his eyes burning with hatred. He scanned the room until his gaze landed on me. I didn't look away, not this time. The testimonies were brutal. One by one, secrets poured out. Women he had silenced, business partners he had threatened, even family members he had manipulated. Every truth was a nail in his coffin. When the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts, the silence in the room was deafening. And then a slow, rising murmur of relief. Justice, at last, had spoken. But justice doesn't heal overnight. Daniel sat in the back of the courtroom, his face pale, his eyes hollow. When it was over, he came to me. His hands shook as he reached for mine. "I don't know if I can ever forgive him," he whispered. You whispered. "You don't have to," I said softly. "You just have to free yourself." For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with. Not whole, not healed, but breathing again. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse lighter. Not free of scars, no. Those would stay with me forever. But free of chains. Because the truth is, revenge isn't fire and fury. It isn't dramatic confrontations or courtroom gasps. Revenge is survival. It's reclaiming the pieces of yourself that someone tried to steal. It's standing tall in the ruins they left behind and saying, "I am still here." And I was. The house grew quiet again, but this time, the silence wasn't suffocating. It was peace. I planted flowers in the yard, ones that bloomed bright and stubborn. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped jumping at shadows. He was gone, locked away, his power stripped, his name ruined, his family free from his grip. And me? I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the survivor of his story and the author of my own. So when people ask me if I regret exposing him, if I regret burning down everything to reveal the truth, I tell them this. Sometimes you have to let everything collapse in order to rebuild. Sometimes destruction is the only path to freedom. And I'll never forget the moment I stood in front of him, chains around his wrists, hatred in his eyes, and thought, "You tried to bury me, but you forgot I was a seed." It has been 3 years since that night in the courtroom, 3 years since his empire turned to dust, since the mask was ripped from his face, since justice finally called his name. And yet, even now, I sometimes wake in the middle of the night, breath caught in my chest, convinced I can still hear his voice in the hallway. Trauma doesn't disappear, it lingers, a shadow that follows even in the brightest sun. But I am not the same woman I was then. Back then, I was small, quiet, terrified. I walked on eggshells, convinced that silence would keep me safe. I believed family honor mattered more than my own sanity.
I believed secrets should stay buried, even when they rotted everything they touched. Now I know better. I live in a small apartment, not the sprawling house with its suffocating walls. The air here feels lighter. I filled my shelves with books, my walls with art, my mornings with music. The flowers I planted bloom by my window each spring, their colors defiant against the gray of the city. Daniel and I, we didn't survive together. The truth is, love cannot always weather storms of that magnitude. He tried, God knows he tried, but the weight of betrayal and the poison of silence had already done their damage. One evening, with tears in his eyes, he told me he needed to find himself again. I let him go. It hurt, but it also set me free. Because my healing was never going to come from him or from anyone else. It had to come from me. And it did. I started therapy. I spoke the words I had buried for years, words I once thought would kill me if I said them aloud. But instead of killing me, they freed me. I joined a support group for women who had been silenced, women whose scars ran deep, but whose voices ran deeper. Sitting in that circle, I realized I was not alone. I had never been alone. And in their stories, I found my strength. As for him, the man who thought himself untouchable, time has not been kind. The prison walls that now hold him are nothing compared to the prison of his own mind. I've heard whispers, how his business empire collapsed, how friends abandoned him, how even blood relatives cut ties. His name is no longer spoken with respect, only with disgust. That is karma. That is justice. But I don't celebrate his downfall anymore. I don't smile at his suffering. Because true healing is not about watching your enemies fall. It's about no longer needing to look at them at all. I think back often to the girl I was, the one who sat in silence, who thought her pain was hers to carry alone, who believed speaking out would destroy her family. To that girl, I would whisper, "You are stronger than you think. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to become after." And to every woman listening to this, whether you've walked my path or feared you might, hear me when I say, silence protects no one but the abuser. Speak, scream if you must. Your voice is a weapon, sharper than any blade, brighter than any torch. Revenge? Revenge is not fire. It isn't blood. It isn't the destruction of others. Revenge is survival. Revenge is walking out of the ashes with your head high, scars shining like armor, refusing to let them define you. I lost years to fear, but I will not lose the rest of my life. Now, I wake with purpose. I write, I share. I reach out to women who are still trapped in silence, and I tell them, you don't have to stay. You don't have to suffer. You don't have to give him the power of your silence. If there is one thing I want you to carry with you after hearing my story, let it be this. They may break your trust. They may try to shatter your body, your mind, your spirit. But they cannot erase your strength. And they cannot silence you. Not forever. I am proof of that.
And maybe, just maybe, by telling this story, I can plant a seed in someone else's heart, a seed of courage, a seed of defiance, a seed that says, I will not be buried. Because in the end, we are not the tragedies that happen to us. We are the survivors who rise from them. And that, I believe, is the greatest revenge of all.